I was fostered by Ryan's family for 10 years, just because Ryan was so reckless that I ended up with brain damage. My reaction is half a beat slower than others. Everyone says he treats me so well. I'm just lucky to be stupid. Until our childhood friend framed me and pushed me into the water, but it turned out to be a blessing in disguise. Full of joy, I went to find Ryan, only to hear him gossiping with someone. I could never like a fool like her. His friend asked, "Then are you still going to marry her?" Ryan's tired voice sounded, "Yes, I will. Marrying her will atone for my sins, and we can always divorce later." So, on the day of our marriage registration, I escaped. Later, I heard that the playboy young master from Ryan's family traveled all over the 7 continents, just to find a little fool. Seeing Ryan again, I was attending a charity fundraising gala as a representative. Gone was the youthful innocence. Now he had taken over the family business, looking mature and dignified. Every move he made exuded composure. Beside him was Celine. She used to be my best friend. I quietly buried myself in food, not even looking at him. In truth, we had no more connection between us, but Celine seemed determined not to let me off easy, saying dramatically, "Irene, you finally decided to come back." As if we were close friends. I lowered my gaze, remaining silent. She continued on her own. "You were so sly, leaving without a word back then, making Ryan and me look for you for so long." I was stunned for a moment. Then I understood. After so many years, they should have been together by now. Those present were all astute people. Seeing us chatting, they joined in. Are Celine and Irene old acquaintances? Some had recognized me. I remember Irene's family and Ryan's family had an engagement. Did you get married? Ryan raised his glass to drink, but his gaze was fixed on me, with emotions I couldn't quite decipher. What are you saying? Didn't you see Celine always sitting next to Ryan? Realizing the mistake, the person quickly changed the subject. I heard Irene just returned to the country, coming back to participate in a charity fundraiser, truly beautiful and kind-hearted. The fundraiser was specifically for children with intellectual disabilities. The aim was to provide them with better medical assistance and help them recover to normal sooner. I came to participate as a favor to someone. Celine seemed to seize an opportunity, smiled, but couldn't hide the scorn in her eyes. Of course, because Irene has the most say after all. What do you mean? Someone asked. She looked past the crowd to me. After all, fools understand fools the best. Ryan, isn't your foundation looking for a spokesperson? Irene is the best choice. Fools advocating for fools could potentially raise more funds. After she said that, the crowd reacted differently. Celine quickly covered her mouth. I'm sorry, I misspoke. Irene isn't dumb. I furrowed my brows, set down my chopsticks, and lost my appetite. Celine eyed me triumphantly, thinking she could still deceive me as before. I wiped my hands, raised my gaze, and locked eyes with her. Yes, I'm no longer foolish, all thanks to you. If you hadn't intentionally pushed me into the water, causing me to hit a pillar, I wouldn't have been miraculously healed, right? The former best friend who once fancied my boyfriend. I still remember that day, my college graduation, after taking pictures and saying goodbye to my classmates. Celine said Ryan had prepared a surprise for me. He also mentioned before that we would register our marriage after my graduation. I thought it was a proposal, and I believed her. But Celine took me to an abandoned swimming pool. She changed from her usual sweet demeanor and said, "There's no surveillance here," then forcefully pushed me into the water. Since childhood, I had been afraid of water after nearly drowning and damaging my brain from a fever. I couldn't swim and ended up hitting a metal pillar nearby, feeling dizzy. Through the haze, I heard her speaking. "Since you're foolish, why not be totally foolish? Why make Ryan bear the responsibility of caring for you, make him shoulder you for a lifetime, and leave me no chance? Irene, why? I'm better than you, smarter than you. He could have seen me without you." And she left. As I was about to sink to the bottom, a strong will to survive made me remember words I read in a book before. Relax and let yourself float to the surface. Then you will be saved. Later, I managed to pull myself out of the water, feeling as if the fog in my mind had dissipated, and I became clear-headed. It was a blessing in disguise. At my words, Celine's face turned pale, breathing rapidly, while Ryan seemed still bemused. I had no mood to stay any longer, got up and left. As I was messaging by the door, Ryan stood in front of me. His eyes were cast down, reflecting my image. His tone carried some regained surprise and cautious probing. "Irene, can we talk?" I shook my head. "No, I'm waiting for my boyfriend." "Boyfriend?" Ryan's expression stiffened, seeming a bit unsteady, but also disbelieving. I averted my gaze, then continued. "I came back this time to get engaged." His face turned so grim it could almost drip water. After a while, he suppressed his voice. You disappeared for so many years. Now you're back, and then you tell me you're getting engaged. Irene, do you think it's fun to push me away like this? Ryan's throat seemed to tighten, and his questioning laced with melancholy. He just stubbornly watched me, insisting on getting an explanation from me before giving up. I pursed my lips, looking up at him. Ryan, does it matter to you whether I come back or not? Do I have a reason to report my whereabouts to you? He pursed his lips, but never took his eyes off me for a second. There were so many emotions swirling in his eyes, but they finally boiled down to one sentence. Are you lying to me, right? I didn't understand why he didn't believe that I had a boyfriend. Or maybe he still thought I was the same silly girl who used to revolve around him, with her heart only holding him. Do you know I was looking for you? I interrupted him. I don't want to hear it, Ryan, it's pointless. Why is it pointless? He took a step closer to me, and I took a step back. Seeing me resist him, he looked hurt. You used to be so clingy to me. I had no idea that 5 years ago, Celine would push you into the water. If I had known, seemingly hitting the nail on the head, his eyes lit up, and he explained frantically. Are you misunderstanding my relationship with her? I haven't been with her. I've been waiting for you all these years. A muffled roar sounded, the wind picked up, and a slight drizzle fell from the sky. I watched him quietly, as he took a deep breath, and reached out to help me straighten out my stray hair. I turned my head to avoid it. He paused, slowly let go, his tone choked. Didn't we agree to get married after you graduate? Didn't you say you'd only marry me when you grew up? Irene, don't look at me with such unfamiliar eyes. His vulnerability left me feeling unsure. He wasn't like this before. He used to despise me. It was he himself who said no marriage, just as he wished. That day, when I climbed out of the pool joyously, eager to find Ryan and tell him the good news, I overheard him talking to his friends. I couldn't possibly like a fool like her. For so many years, I've done everything I could for Irene. His friend chuckled and asked, isn't she the adopted daughter in your family? I heard she's been living with you for 10 years. You've only had Irene by your side all these years. Isn't that love? Get lost. Ryan exhaled a puff of smoke. You've been single since birth. What do you know about love? After a burst of laughter, someone dared to ask, actually, I'm curious. Irene is a fool. Do you have any desires for a woman like her? Ryan's face turned cold. He pursed his lips. After a short silence, he said, curious, her. Then catch her and see if you have any physical reactions to a fool. My fingertips shrank, feeling like something inside me was slowly breaking. She's your girl, not me, but from your tone, are you still marrying her? After a slight pause, Ryan's weary voice came. I'll marry her, bring her home. That's enough atonement. We can always get a divorce later. I stood at the door, soaking wet, feeling a chill creeping through my whole body. Ryan's friend was the first to notice me, Irene. I was led into a private room, warm air blowing, and I couldn't stop shivering. My delayed reaction allowed the pain in my heart to spread through my body for a longer time, but it was more vividly felt. Ryan stubbed out his cigarette and smiled faintly, heard it all. I mumbled an acknowledgement. Unconcerned, he thought since I was foolish, it didn't matter if I heard. So, with a hint of contempt, he glanced at me. You've made a mess of yourself again. Irene, when will you stop embarrassing me? Haven't you caused me enough shame? I stayed silent, my nose tingling with bitterness. After some thought, I spoke softly. Ryan, if you don't want to marry me, you could have told me directly, instead of embarrassing me in front of so many people with such excuses. I won't cling to you. I won't pester you. Moreover, this marriage was promised when I was 18, the year I entered college. When you personally told both sets of parents. You said taking care of Irene, protecting Irene had become a habit. I told Irene a long time ago that I would marry her when I grew up, because I liked her, not out of duty or guilt. Now, however, all you say is marrying me will be an atonement, and we can divorce later. I may have been slow to react, but I could still sense your impatience in Ryan's tone. I understood his underlying message, the burden he saw me as. I'd been called a little fool by others, while he was the pride of the heavens, with many suitors. A timid girl like me might actually diminish his status. So, I looked down at him and asked calmly, if you don't like me, why lie to me about marrying me? Ryan, you could have just interacted with me as a brother. Ryan stood up, his brows furrowed. Do you know what my parents would think if I told you directly? They've already concluded that you're their future daughter-in-law. Would it matter if I said anything? You've been following me since childhood. You like me so much. Can I reject you with the reason of a brother? So, it's my fault. But, he had said with his own mouth that he liked me. I pressed down on the spot on my chest, feeling a bit painful. I knew what to do. I bowed deeply to him, suppressing the choked-up voice. Thank you, brother, for taking care of me all these years. Let's not get married, You don't need to worry about me embarrassing you anymore. When I called him brother, Ryan's face became even darker. It seemed like it was the first time this little fool of mine had defied him, stood up to him. As I turned to leave, someone blocked my way. His friend was a bit anxious. Irene, Ryan was just angry. You're about to get married. What are you two doing? I trembled as I walked out, hearing the sound of a broken glass from behind. Ryan smashed a chair, suppressed with anger. Irene, if you walk out that door, don't regret it. I turned back, looked at him in the shadows, and smiled lightly. I won't regret it. From behind came the voice, Ryan, go after Irene and comfort her. She's just a kid. Why are you arguing with her? I wanted to say, I have never been a child. I just react slower than others. I can understand what people say and feel the malice behind it. But the answer I got was Ryan's cold voice, each word piercing into my ears. She doesn't cling to me, that's best. No marriage, just as I wish. So, I can't understand Ryan now, but I don't want to be entangled with him anymore. He just looked at me silently, waiting for my answer. What answer does he want? Some answers are inherently hurtful. During our eye contact, his assistant rushed over in a hurry. Ryan, Celine is having an attack and is choking. You'd better go check on her. You have to meet her parents tonight. Ryan immediately turned around, then looked back at me. Irene, can you wait for me? I'll be right back. I shook my head. No need to wait. When I saw him again, I didn't feel much of a psychological impact. After his figure disappeared, I obediently waited for Steve in the lobby. Originally, he had other things to do, and I had told him I could take a taxi home, but he insisted on coming to pick me up. The light rain outside gradually intensified, and the entire sky became overcast. This city has a lot of rain, and I regret not listening to Steve and bringing an umbrella when I went out. With a light sigh, my gaze fell on a familiar black car not far away. As I got ready to stand up, the man with long legs had already come out, dressed in a perfectly fitting black suit that made him look even taller, exuding a cold and noble aura. He held a black umbrella, but his gaze was locked on me, and he quickly waved at me to step back. I had no choice but to withdraw my legs. He walked towards me step by step. There was still a smile on his face that could melt anyone. He seemed to be the kind of person who is always gentle with me, always emotionally stable. It wasn't until he reached me and extended his hand towards me that I reacted. I reached out and shook his warm, broad hand. Steve lightly laughed and interlocked his fingers with mine. Have you been waiting long? Are you tired? I shook my head. He enveloped me under the umbrella, holding onto my shoulder to ensure not a single drop of rain touched me. The familiar woody scent made me feel at ease. On the passenger seat, there were desserts and snacks he specially bought. In case you're not full, I pointed to my stomach. It's already so plump. That's not enough. Our Irene needs to gain a little more weight. Inside the car, I told him about the encounter with Ryan today. I had never expected to see them. He rubbed my head, his face somewhat serious. Did they bully you? I shook my head. It's my fault. Shouldn't have let you come on my behalf. It's okay, Irene. Now I won't let anyone easily bully you. Steve knows about my situation. After returning from the bar that day, I messaged both sets of parents saying I wouldn't marry anymore. Then I packed my bags and went abroad. I wasn't avoiding them. I just wanted some quiet time. For so many years, I was used to being by Ryan's side, either painting or with him and Celine. It seems like I had never stepped out of this circle. So I wanted to learn to live independently, to grow, to make normal friends. I thought leaving someone who didn't like me would make me feel relieved. But the withdrawal symptoms hit harder than I expected. It was the tangible companionship of over a decade, and the childhood friendship we had from always being together day in and day out. Ryan had been very good to me in the past, so much so that others said he had no bottom line when it came to me, and he didn't get angry, but rather lovingly watched me, saying we would be together forever. But ever since he entered society, he had started to change. He cared about what others thought of me, about the opinions people had about him. It seemed like having me around was embarrassing, but I didn't know what I had done wrong. I knew I was slow to react, always quietly by Ryan's side, never causing trouble for him. I knew I wasn't clever enough. When he took me to gatherings, I would smile and behave well next to him, because Mom said if someone greets you, respond with a smile. I knew I wasn't outstanding enough, so I worked hard to shine in my only hobby, painting, to show him that I wasn't a burden, and I could also live well relying on my own skills. But no one told me why someone who used to like me no longer did. No one taught me what to do if he stopped liking me. I had to figure out a way to keep myself from getting hurt a little bit. It was a painful process, but slowly, I understood that I couldn't ask someone to stand still forever, just like me, who was still a little foolish. I also admitted that I wasn't brave enough. I still cried in the middle of the night, thinking about the days we used to have. The sun was shining brightly then. He waved at me, saying, "Irene, take your time walking. I'll always be here." Yet, I had never thought about turning back. Steve's appearance was unexpected. That day, I was sitting on a bench staring at the seagulls blankly, watching them freely flying in the sky. I felt envious. Then I slowly walked to the edge of the sea, trying to reach out to make them stop for me. My feet were wet by the sea water, and as I was about to retreat, a man behind me suddenly hugged me back. He said, "Don't lose hope. Seagulls won't die for you." He misunderstood that I was contemplating suicide. He said he had been observing me for a long time. He said I was always alone, that there was no light in my eyes. That was a bad sign. I told him that I used to have some trouble with my brain, that my reactions were slow, so I would be slow to get over things compared to others. There are some bad memories that just can't be forgotten. To this day, I still remember Steve's voice being warm, clear, and pleasant amidst the calls of the seagulls. He said, "No need to rush to forget. If you let the good memories occupy all of your heart, the bad ones will only dare to lurk in the corner." I thought he made a lot of sense. Since that day, Steve slowly barged into my life. He knew I liked painting, so he took me to experience various cities. In the watery city of Venice, we went to secret spots that tourists hadn't been to with the locals. In the streets of Rome, he rode a bike, taking me through the streets and alleys, recounting Roman holiday. He said life is never as we wish it to be, but encountering someone is the greatest gift from above. Outside the Leaning Tower of Pisa, he held up an umbrella for me, nurturing my fleeting inspirations. And beneath the setting sun at Prague Castle, he made a wish with his hands together. For the first time, with someone else's company, I saw different sceneries. For the first time, I realized that a life without Ryan and Celine, having other friends, was such a wonderful experience. Until I realized something was wrong, and it seemed like Steve had developed feelings for me. I instinctively wanted to escape, but he stopped me. I stuttered as I told him about my shortcomings and issues. I was dim, slow, not slick enough, not understanding the ways of the world, feeling like a burden to others, having many flaws. He interrupted me. "Irene, isn't this your most pure and beautiful quality? Why do you feel like you are a burden to others? My friends, all really like you. They find chatting with you very enjoyable. They all say, being friends with Irene is a wonderful thing. You are very good at providing emotional value to others. So, don't underestimate yourself." I felt a warm tingling in my heart. It turns out what Mom said before was true. She said, "Our Irene is not stupid. She just cherishes others' every move and carefully considers how to make others happy with her words and actions. She holds absolute goodwill toward everyone." If Irene doesn't know how to express herself, being a smiling listener will make people like her. So now, Steve says many people like me. I felt my eyes welling up a bit. It seems I am not a burden to others. They wouldn't look at me strangely. Instead, they would say, "It's so great to be friends with Irene." Steve prepared a grand confession ceremony for me, inviting all our good friends as witnesses. I couldn't help but ask him why he liked me, and I counted on my fingers, saying my personality is bland, not lively enough, just painting every day. Steve held my finger, warmth spreading throughout my body. He tilted his head, his profound eyes shining like stars. "When you like someone, you like everything about them. I like you like this, not because of who you are, but because you are you." I also told him about Ryan, trying to scare him away. After all, even childhood sweethearts can grow tired of me after over a decade, let alone someone I've known for only 2 years. He said, "Irene, relationships are different between people. We will have a normal romance. Not out of pity, not out of sympathy, not out of guilt." I was puzzled. A normal romance. It's you confessing to me, us going on dates, holding hands as we roam the streets, eating together, watching movies, cooking together, living together, sharing every moment of our lives. Later, Steve really did all that. It made me realize, is this what love is like? Seeing my worst side and still loving me. Seeing my negativity, but praising the good qualities in me and lifting me up. There will be anticipation, bitterness, sweetness, arguments, tempers, but also making up, not being able to help sharing every little thing with him, planning our future life together. That future is him and me. In ordinary days, I found a way to live comfortably. In that moment, I thought of Ryan. It's as if we never officially said we were together. It was like a duty, a habit. He felt like he had to take care of me, so naturally, he held my hand. We both knew without saying it, assuming we were together. Maybe he wasn't even sure if his feelings for me were love or obligation. If in the beginning, we could have been together in front of everyone's eyes, red-faced, accepting everyone's blessings in the name of lovers, would the outcome have been different? 3 days later, I met Ryan again, this time back home, preparing for both my engagement with Steve and my art exhibition. What started as a way to appear less foolish turned into something fruitful unexpectedly. In 5 years, I gained some fame in the art circle. I used a new pseudonym. The art exhibition was supposed to be kept confidential, but since we were in my home country, Ryan could find it if he wanted. At that moment, I was admiring the painting I did under the Leaning Tower of Pisa, reminiscing with a slight smirk. Ryan interrupted my thoughts softly. "Irene, your painting is great." I turned to see him backlit. It seemed like the first time he straightforwardly praised me. I couldn't help but remember that night he frowned at me, looking so embarrassed and uneasy, saying I embarrassed him. Steve would never talk to me like that, even if I messed up something. He would comfort me first, saying we're all newcomers in this world, who can guarantee we'll get everything right. I nodded at him, waiting for his next words. I knew he didn't come just to admire a painting. Sure enough, he moved closer to me, then remembered my resistance that day and slowly stepped back. After a while, he spoke again. "Seeing you back, I'm really happy. Irene, I want to say, Celine and I have no relationship at all." I didn't know she was also there that day. I had a business deal with her parents at night. She had an asthma attack, so I had to go see her. "Do you know she likes you?" He hesitated, pursed his lips, nodded. "I only found out after you went abroad. She confessed to me, and I turned her down. I really have no other feelings for her." "Do you still like me?" I said softly. "Ryan, no one will always like someone, and no one will wait in the same place forever. I've been waiting for you." His voice choked up a bit. "I thought you were joking that day when I waited for you at the Civil Affairs Bureau all day." Speechless, I sighed. "I never joke about love. For 5 years, I've flown to every place you could possibly be, but couldn't find you." He reached into his bag and took out a thick stack of plane tickets. "I never thought about leaving you, I just..." In that moment, I suddenly felt like a burden, ashamed to be with you. Was I the embarrassing fiancé you couldn't show off? Ryan, how is it not a betrayal of our childhood friendship, slapping in the face all those promises and vows? He covered his face, embarrassed, because I had hit the nail on the head with his thoughts. Still incredulous. "I don't understand. How did we end up here?" "I don't understand either. How can someone change like this over time? This is someone I grew up with, our life paths intricately linked together. After you left, I founded the Orange Light Foundation to help more people, to atone for my sins. I thank you on behalf of all the kids." His eyes flickered, looking at me. "Will you forgive me?" I shook my head. "If I forgive you, I won't be able to make peace with the version of myself that was drowning in pain before. So I hope we never see each other again." He now seeks my forgiveness, because I heard those words he said, and I left decisively. If I hadn't left, but had gone on to marry him pretending as if nothing had happened, he wouldn't be here confessing to me now. He might have been grumbling about me to others in places I couldn't see, finding a reason to divorce me one day. And perhaps even after hurting me, he would say, "Irene, I've paid off the mistakes I made over these years," to shut my mouth, plunging me into deeper self-torment and misery. But I don't doubt his sincerity at this moment. After all, people are always more attached to things and emotions they have lost or couldn't get. "Irene, don't do this." He seemed on the verge of tears. "Give me a chance to make amends." I exhaled and pointed to the painting in front of him. "Doesn't this painting look warm?" My current boyfriend stayed with me and painted with me all afternoon. He didn't rush me, didn't frown, just quietly waited for me. After I finished painting, he would say, "You paint so well," not just to please me, but to encourage me, to give me genuine feedback. No one would dislike someone who is gentle and helps you improve continuously. I raised my left ring finger with the ring. "Ryan, I'm really getting engaged." "You're lying." I softly interrupted him. "I have no reason to lie to you. I've said before, I never joke about love." He still wanted to say something. Steve, who was helping from afar, walked over. I hurried over to hold his hand. Ryan's face turned pale instantly in seeing me holding hands with Steve. I didn't know what he was thinking at that moment, but from his expression, I guessed he must have remembered our past. Remembering how close we used to be, only to later drift apart. Remembering he had said I would always be there, only for him to leave midway, breaking his promise. Irene is silly, slow. No matter who treats her well, she'll remember for a long, long time. So I doubted myself in those early years abroad. Instead of Ryan's faults, I saw his good qualities. Therefore, at night when I couldn't sleep, I wondered if I just became a bit smarter or better, would he keep holding my hand onwards? Later I understood, in the adult world, it's all about filtering. Behind one mountain is yet another higher one. If he didn't choose me, it's understandable. But a firm decision surpasses everything. I just don't fit the image of the partner he wants. But that's not my fault. Is it his though? Ryan's voice trembled as he spoke. I nodded at Steve. He looked at Ryan, not questioning, not hostile, just smiling gently. Thank you for taking care of Irene so well. The color drained from Ryan's face. He parted his lips, but didn't make a sound for a long time. Just his slightly red eyes shifting between me and Steve. Finally, with a strained smile, he spoke in an unsteady voice. It's what I should do. There's nothing obligatory. Steve spoke slowly. If emotions start with a should and must, it becomes a burden when suppressed for long. At this moment, I finally understood why Ryan and I had reached this point today. With a slight tremble in his body, Ryan was tightly clenching his hands, teetering on the brink of an emotional breakdown. I looked at him and softly said, Ryan, thank you for your kindness in the past, but between us, this is where it ends. He didn't seem to want to leave. Steve patted my shoulder. Irene, why don't you go check on the progress over there? I nodded. Steve surely had his reasons for this. I walked towards the other side. I didn't know what they talked about that day. From start to finish, Steve was gentle and gentlemanly. I only saw Ryan bowing slightly at the waist. In the end, he fled in a panic. In that moment, memories from the past flooded back to me. The meticulous care of over a decade only made it impossible for me to accept the fact that he had long despised me when I heard those words. Later on, I also jumped out to think back on the past from an observer's perspective. No one is completely right, and no one is absolutely wrong. It's just that we each want to choose different paths in life. So when he wanted to embark on another journey in life, I was abandoned, but I could understand. There was always guilt between us, an insurmountable barrier. One day, it would crumble. It's just that back then, youthful arrogance prevailed, impulse trumped everything. If only he could have calmly told me he was leaving, or maybe I could have left without a word. Perhaps we would have ended things decently instead of now, where hurtful words have destroyed any hope of going back to the beginning. During the preparation for the art exhibition, Ryan didn't visit again. However, on the day before its opening, I saw Celine. My feelings towards her were more complicated. Celine was the real heiress found when she was 12, not the fake heiress, who was kept due to developing feelings. When she came from the countryside, she was rustic, awkward, and insecure. No friends, plus she had asthma. When she had an asthma attack triggered by someone bullying her, I saved her. That day at the hospital, she broke down in tears, saying she felt sad, that her parents didn't seem to like her very much, and she felt like she was the unwanted one at home. Seeing her cry so heartbreakingly made me uneasy, reminded me of myself. So, I held her hand and told her I would be her good friend. I even introduced her to Ryan. I thought we were good friends, but I never expected Celine to fall in love with Ryan. She even wanted to kill me. Why did you come back? You left, so why come back? She questioned me, but it seems she didn't need my answer. She was venting pent-up emotions. Do you know how jealous I am of you? You're so silly and dumb. Why do you deserve Ryan's love? For so many years, he never even glanced at me. Even when your family intended to arrange a marriage with Celine, he refused. I envy you on one hand, but on the other hand, I can only stay close to him by talking about you. I'm being tormented, just because of what you said. He searched through all the surveillance footage from that day and anyone you might have met, wanting to frame me. But what did I do wrong? I just loved someone who didn't love me back. Is that a sin? She cried bitterly. I stared at her expressionlessly, feeling sorry for her. No one liked you back then, and I was your first friend. I helped you, introduced you to my few friends, treated you as my closest friend, yet you want me to disappear from this world. Celine, that's not how you should treat people. There's no reason to do that. Losing her sob, she pointed at me. If I didn't push you down, would you be okay now? Would you have achieved what you have today? Irene, you are the hypocrite. I saved you. I shook my head, feeling like she was beyond saving, signaling for the security to come forward. I said to her, Celine, when you make mistakes, you should face the consequences. It's not Ryan who wants to put you in trouble. It's me. I planned to resolve it after the art exhibition, but she remained unrepentant. People must always bear the consequences of their initial choices. That day, I stood by the river for a long time, missing many calls from Steve. My mind was in chaos, but I didn't want him to worry, so I answered the phone. Hello. On the other end was Steve's low, soothing voice. I turned around, and there he stood in the wind. I don't know how he found me, but at that moment, my heart felt full. I walked over and hugged him, saying, Steve, Do you think I'm bad? He knew what I meant and gently rubbed my back. If avoiding harm to yourself is considered bad, then wouldn't the world be too small for all the villains? Or if punishing bad people relies on karma, wouldn't it drive God crazy? He made me chuckle, and as I lifted my head, our eyes met. I once thought Celine was a very good friend. Yeah, I know. Shushu always likes to show kindness to others. It's not your fault. I returned to his embrace, sighing softly. I can't help but feel sorry for her. Maybe I shouldn't empathize with her so much. Steve said, empathy is neither a curse nor a reward. It is the talent of the kind-hearted. I've always been proud of you for having such a gift. He always had a way with words, and as I changed position in his arms, I sighed. I just wonder, why do I encounter so many unpleasant things? If everything went smoothly, it wouldn't be called life. What you've lost, missed, there will be better arrangements from above, he comforted. I smiled. Is this arrangement meeting you? Steve grinned. No, I walked towards you myself. On the day of the art exhibition, snowflakes fluttered down again, after a long time. I had the space decorated with feathers and prisms, with the prisms reflecting light onto a huge blank canvas in the middle, creating an artistic spectacle in the night, when the lights reflected off it. Everyone became a part of the artwork. The exhibition was a great success, and many pieces were sold. My art was not cheap. The agent mentioned that someone bought one of my early somewhat dark-themed pieces, depicting a shattered girl in a huge swimming pool, the bright red blood merging with extreme blue, a strong sensory stimulation signifying grand new beginnings. He said the buyer wanted to talk to me after the event, so after the crowd left, I saw Ryan. Sorry for meeting you like this. I know we still have one last farewell between us, he said. That day, Steve had a few words with me. I patiently waited for what he had to say next. He said, Irene's personality didn't develop overnight, but over more than 10 years. The one who's always been wrong is not her. She's always been sensible beyond belief, not wanting to cause you trouble, but you treat her as a disgrace. Your attitude determines how your friends view her. Their strange looks, aren't they all because of you? If after so many years of love, someone else's look or action can make you waver, then you don't truly love her. You say you're trying to atone, that you take care of her out of guilt and responsibility, all just to satisfy your ridiculous ego. And also, making lewd jokes about things between men and women. You really have no class. I pursed my lips, trying hard to keep the sourness rising in my nose at bay. Ryan took a deep breath. He also talked about what you've been up to in recent years. Irene is a very kind and obedient girl. When my friend gave her a small gift, she would be so flustered, unable to believe it, wanting to repay with even greater kindness. But even after I spent years helping her dispel the darkness within, in the beginning of our relationship, she would still tirelessly tell me she's stupid, slow, that she doesn't seem worthy of love. Otherwise, why would the person who seemed to like her for so long actually not like her? Is she not deserving of love? No, it's you, Ryan, who isn't worthy. She's doing well now, growing into the person she wants to be. And now you come looking for her, asking her to turn back. On what grounds? He choked up a bit as he looked at me. I've been wrong all along. Every day since you left, I've regretted those words I said. I regret using that tone to hurt you, to embarrass you. Countless nights, I've wondered if things would have been different if I could have just smiled and said good things about you when others asked. If I could have kept you close during every gathering, introduced you to everyone, said we've been childhood sweethearts with a deep connection, would we have made it through? I sniffed, unsure of what to say. I looked at his slightly teary eyes. So, can you at least say you're sorry to me? He lowered his head, shadows showing through his eyelashes, his lips trembling slightly. Irene, I'm sorry. So between us, there's no chance anymore, is that right? The glistening tears clung to his eyelashes, and after a moment, tears streamed down his face. This was the first time he cried in front of me. I turned away, watching Steve walking towards me under the umbrella in the snowfall. In the fluttering snowflakes, his eyes brimmed with a smile. His black coat stood out amidst the vast white scenery, looking solitary and elegant. It seemed like everything else in the world had disappeared, leaving only him. Unconsciously, I curled my lips into a smile. He came over and put a scarf around me, patting my face. Your cheeks are all red from the cold. Still standing here smiling. He then took my hand and placed it in his warm pocket. I had someone make your favorite sweet porridge. You can have it when you get home. Under his umbrella shielding the snowflakes falling continuously, I smiled back at him. Okay. When I turned around, Ryan seemed puzzled, looking at me and Steve, with a hint of sadness in his eyes for some reason. Maybe he was reminded of how close we used to be after what just happened, feeling uncomfortable. The white snowflakes soon covered his shoulders, almost bending him over. Ryan, it's time to say goodbye to the past. We both need to move forward. As he left, he stayed in the same spot. When I turned back, I saw him crouched on the ground, shoulders shaking, slowly turning into a black speck. Engagement set for the 6th of next month. How do you feel about that? I cheerfully took Steve's hand. You decide. I'm good with anything. He affectionately rubbed my head. Silly, have you forgotten? That day is the anniversary of our first meeting. I realized, Steve always enjoys these romantic gestures. He corrected me, wrong. It's about the sense of ceremony. Whether at the beginning, middle, or end, every day we love each other is worth celebrating. I suddenly remembered a phrase we saw at the museum with Steve. Believe firmly, pain will end someday, love will eventually come. So I reached out and hugged him. Steve, thank you for your sense of ceremony. Thank you for being in my life.